Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is John Musella, and I'm pleased to welcome you to the first and only 25th Congressional Forum between Congressman Mike Garcia and Assemblywoman Christy Smith. As you all know, the SCV Chamber was pleased to host our two candidates for a similar forum during the special election in April, and we now welcome them back to hear what they have to share with us as we are 2 weeks away now from the November 3rd general election. Due to the global pandemic, this election is more crucial than ever, and you should have received all your ballots in the mail by now. We urge everyone to check out SCV Chamber's Election Watch 2020 page, which can be found at scvchamber.com under the Advocacy tab at the top of the page. The Chamber created this resource for you to find all the information you need about voting in one place. You can find where to drop off your ballot, how to track your ballot, and where you can vote in person on November 3rd if you so choose to do so. At the same time, you will also be able to check in the Chamber's candidate endorsements, check that out, as well as our official positions on state propositions and local initiatives. Before we begin, there are a couple of housekeeping items I want to go over with you today. First off, if you experience any trouble, please email hello@scvchamber.com, as we will be monitoring that email during this forum. Today's questions have come directly to us from our members and local businesses. With that, I'd like to now turn it over to the Chamber's 2020 Election Watch Candidate Forum moderator, Peter Warda, who will review the rules and format for today's forum. Peter?
Thank you, John. Good afternoon, and thank you all for joining us. My name is Peter Warda with the Santa Clarita Valley Chamber of Commerce, and I'll be your moderator this afternoon. I'd like to first welcome and thank Congressman Mike Garcia and Assemblywoman Christy Smith for being here, as well as our attendees for virtually joining us. For those of you watching, we have already gone in detail over the forum rules with our candidates, but we will go ahead and review the basics with you all. Opening remarks were chosen at random, and we will begin with Congressmember Mike Garcia, and each candidate will have 2 minutes. A digital coin toss was conducted with the candidates to determine who will answer the first question first. Answers will then be alternated between each candidate. Congressman Mike Garcia won the coin toss, so he will begin the first question. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond to the questions, with a 1-minute rebuttal for the candidate who answered first. Closing remarks will be kept to 2 minutes per candidate, with the order reversed, and will begin with Assemblywoman Christy Smith. Time limits will be strictly enforced to ensure we get through each of our questions. I will alert each candidate when they have 30 seconds, and again when their time is complete. It will be at my discretion to interrupt or mute any candidate if they don't follow the time limit. Most importantly, candidates shall not interrupt one another, and there's a zero tolerance policy for any personal attacks or personal remarks. Once again, it'll be at my discretion to interrupt or mute any candidate that is violating any rule. Hump Raleigh from Poole, Shaffrey, and Kegley, and John Musella from the Musella Group, and both representatives of the SCV Chamber, will alternate asking the candidates questions. Questions were not shared ahead of time with either campaigns or Mr. Brawley and Mr. Musella. It will be at my discretion to ensure Mr. Brawley and Mr. Musella ask the questions as they were submitted without personal bias or input. I reserve the right to interrupt and clarify the questions if need be. With that, we are ready to begin our forum. Congressman Garcia, the floor is yours for opening remarks. You have 2 minutes, and your time will start once you begin speaking.
Hey, thank you, Peter. Thanks again for having us. Enjoy being back here. It's an honor to be in front of the chamber. Christy, thanks for joining us as well. I want to first thank you all for the tremendous support over the last 6 months. I want to thank the U.S. Chamber of Commerce for their endorsement yesterday. It really is a testimony of my advocacy for lower taxes, being pro-business, pro-growth, being a businessman and not a career bureaucrat or politician. I'm looking forward to continuing to serve another 2 years and represent this beautiful 25th district. Today does mark the first day of the 6th month of my term here. It's been a magnificent honor and a magnificent journey with a steep learning curve. We did hit the ground running as promised. We opened 3 offices in the first 60 days. We've covered 50 constituent casework packages. These are folks who needed help with Social Security, VA benefits, and COVID benefits as well. We've gotten through the backlog where we had no representation for nearly 8 months. We've done a magnificent job. We held a town hall in the first 60 days of being in office. We've distributed 8 public newsletters now, and that's at a rate of roughly 3 per week. Visited 60 businesses and have engaged the chamber, not only this one, but the Simi Valley Chamber of Commerce and the Antelope Valley almost 14 times now, 14 times in fact. So it's been a magnificent journey. We're doing a lot of good for the district, representing us well at the federal level, not only the district, but also the state, bringing federal fire aid to the state now for emergency purposes in the wake of our terrible fires. Already co-sponsored 28 bills and never missed a vote. I had a promise to fly out to DC even in the midst of the COVID crisis to make sure that we were representing in person, and I was voting in person, and haven't missed a single vote now through 109 actual votes that we've done in the last 6 months. So it's been a tremendous honor. This election is about public safety. It's about national security. It's about advocating for our law enforcement and taking care of this district and really making sure that our nation doesn't become what California has become, being victim of really terrible policies, high taxes, lots of bureaucracy, and
Thank you,
bills like
Congressman
CA-25, which have really killed our businesses. So it's an honor to be here and looking forward to the discussions.
Thank you. Assemblywoman Christy Smith, your opening remarks. You have 2 minutes, and your time will begin once you begin speaking.
Thank you, Peter. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, fellow chamber members. It has been an honor and a privilege to serve this district at the state assembly level, but it's also been an honor and a privilege to be a member of this chamber along with my husband, Phil, and to stand in solidarity with all of you as we've been through these really trying times since March here nationally, and being there for each of your businesses as we figure out ways to access the resources. As Mike mentioned, we went for an extended period of time without representation, and many of you during that time reached out to my office for help and support, both with federal aid that was available, state aid that was available, and more so now as we all reach out, promote one another's businesses, make sure that we're doing all that we can to be supportive, to make sure that our Main Street commerce stays strong through the midst of this really incredible time. So, Phil and I both, we've been busting our budget every night on takeout to make sure that all of our favorite locals have those dollars coming in the door. But now is a critical moment in our nation's history, and the challenges ahead of us in really finally coming to terms with the COVID crisis, in containing it, and then making sure that we've got a solid plan to stand our economy back up with tax incentives, with a future-looking tax plan, and with real solid support for business startup costs. And how we envision this future in a post-COVID environment is something that I'm committed to, and really look forward to answering your questions today.
Perfect. Thank you both for that. We will now go into our question and answer session. Congressman Garcia, you won the coin toss, so you will begin first, and Mr. Brawley has the first question.
Thank you, Peter, and thank you, Congressman and Assemblywoman, for joining us and your commitment for running for office. So the first question, what are your 3 legislative priorities for business and the economy if you are elected in November?
Yeah, absolutely. The focus right now is making sure that we are getting businesses back online. From a legislative perspective, I just co-sponsored a bill at the national level that prevents a similar bill to what we have in California called AB5, which is putting independent contractors out of business. This will make sure that we can continue to grow not only independent contractors, but small businesses who like to have the flexibility. AB5 has killed our economy here in California. Christy Smith has supported it from day one. She has failed to vote to repeal it. In the first month of the COVID shutdown, I called for the repeal through the governor's office and our local legislators to repeal AB5, and Christy Smith actually voted against that repeal when it came up for a vote. So that's one thing, visiting or ensuring and making sure we're protecting small businesses. Making permanent the tax cuts of 2017 is a massive issue. The tax cuts that we enjoyed under the 2017 Tax Cut and Jobs Act, and it was all tax brackets. It was literally every family that enjoyed a doubling of their tax deduction, needs to be made permanent. And we need to negotiate the removal of the state and local tax deduction limit. This is something that frankly didn't benefit California in that package. And in order to negotiate that out, we need someone in office who understands how businesses operate, who understands the economy and how these types of tax initiatives actually affect the average family member. What we don't need is someone from Sacramento who's actually been supporting and raising our taxes to the tune of about $3 billion since she's been in office. So that's the second biggest piece of legislation. The third thing is it's about public safety, and we've got to make sure that we're doing the right things at all levels when it comes to public safety. There's a lot of facets to that. Making sure that we're not defunding police, making sure that we're investing in the deforestation elements that go into not only the federal but also the state lands that surround us. Making sure that we're investing in large aerial tankers that actually will put the fires out instead of just managing them here in the near term. Not burying our heads in the sand and attributing it to other natural phenomena. And actually,
that's the 2 minutes.
Money at the right places to do it.
Sorry, thank you.
No worries.
Assemblywoman Christy Smith, you have 2 minutes to respond.
Thank you. So first and foremost, we need to come to terms in a very realistic and scientifically based way with the COVID crisis. We know now the economic downfall that is ahead of us if we don't get this crisis under control. And that means a national plan for contact tracing, for testing, for ensuring that those are widely available, distributed across all 50 states, and that we are following through and implementing until we get a COVID infection rate that is manageable and under control in order to reopen our economy. Reopening our economy is going to mean substantial investments. I've taken some significant steps towards that here in the state legislature. I co-authored a business restart tax credit program. We have also gone to great lengths here on the ground in the district, making sure that we are connecting our business community and our healthcare provider community with essential PPE that they need in order to be able to just conduct basic business and functional services during this crisis and this time of pandemic. And then finally, we do need a forward-thinking program for economic growth coming out of what has been a limited growth period because of COVID. That means we're going to need tax incentives for business restart. We're going to need cash investment and stimulus payments directly to businesses at every level, and not just for those with the best banking relationships, but those mom and pop Main Street businesses right here in our own community that need to be able to put employees back on payroll, to restock their shelves and to reopen their doors. So this means a significant investment in terms of putting American small and mid-sized businesses first. I've already started that work. Look forward to partnering with all of you as we move forward with the rest.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Smith. Congressman Garcia, you have 1 minute for rebuttal should you choose.
Yeah, the COVID issue is on the forefront. Realistically, between the federal government and the state governments, we need to figure this problem out and get the relief to the people that need it the most before the end of the year. So you're asking about my next term. In this term, over the course of the next several months, we need to get a COVID package passed. What that COVID package needs to look at, and this is based on the information that I've elicited from the various chambers, the 60 businesses that I've met with over the last 6 months. And what we need to do is be able to still offer small businesses the PPP program that they desperately need it. There's about $138 billion still left in that pot. We also need to get about $400 per week for unemployment insurance for those individual employees that still need the help. That's a package that needs to be negotiated in Washington, D.C. And unfortunately, there's politicians that are holding that hostage right now instead of passing it. But looking forward to negotiating across the aisles and actually bringing this desperately needed help back to the taxpayers.
Thank you both. I have Mr. Musella with the second question. We will start with Assemblywoman Christy Smith. You have 2 minutes.
Perfect, thank you. Next question. The consequences of this pandemic are going to be around for the entirety of your first term. What will you do to assist local businesses and the economy should you be elected? Do you think the federal government should be doing more to help businesses and workers?
Yeah, that's a great question, John. Thank you so much. And I think I addressed some of that in my prior answer, but first and foremost, we need a meaningful and scientifically based plan to get the virus itself under control. Second, we need a national plan for investment in PPE that as we bring the infection rates under control, those who have to be out in the work environment, particularly those in healthcare and our essential economic industries, can be covered and be kept safe, again, containing the spread and the infection. But in terms of economic investment, we found right here in California, and I'm sure states across the country are feeling the same, without a significant cash infusion, stimulus payments to those who need it most, individuals as well as businesses, that growth will not be re-stimulated. The federal level, Federal Reserve has done all that they can with monetary policy to make access to capital as expansive as it can be. It's reached its limit. So it's time now for smart fiscal policy, which means real investment, through a plan and a measure, which I agree should be achieved prior to the end of this year. It's absolutely urgent. I cannot imagine putting California families and California small businesses through the fourth quarter of this year without additional help and support coming their way. So once I start in January, you can count on me to look forward to the rest. We know that there are jobs we will have permanently lost in this economy. So we need meaningful investment in regional job training programs that correlate to what growth looks like in those industries that might be growing in any given area. And where possible, we need to be partners with our economic development corporations and others who are seeking to expand growth in their own regional economies.
Thank you. Congressman, you have 2 minutes.
Yeah, the irony of Assemblywoman Smith's position is that she's had the ability to repeal AB 5, which actually would have avoided losing hundreds of thousands of jobs in the last 6 months in the midst of the COVID environment, but she chose to vote to not repeal that bill. It was low-hanging fruit. It was something California could have done immediately. At the federal level, we have released about $3 trillion of direct investments back into the economy. We will continue to do that. We do need to get another bill out that's roughly $1.5 trillion. That's the $400 per week for individual taxpayers, like I talked about, the extension of PPP through the end of the year so that small businesses can stay solvent. This wasn't a lack of management from the small businesses. They were forced to shut down by the governor, by various levels of the government, and now they're being forced to stay shut down in California. And I think it's long in the tooth, and we need to figure out how to open businesses back up. So we will get the federal resources onto the street, but we do need to turn the lights back on. We've got to get back in business. We've got to get our kids back into the classroom. The federal protection should also include liability protection. It should require less dependency on China as a primary supplier to the United States. And we need to focus on bringing manufacturing back here into the United States and not being so dependent primarily on China. We realize a lot of vulnerabilities. This is something with my background as a national security expert, not only as an operator, but as someone who's been in the industry for a long time. We have been over-reliant on China, and we are vulnerable to that. So get the help on the streets through the federal government. Partner with the state government. Hopefully state legislators will do the right things and actually remove AB 5 and allow us to get back to work, allow individual taxpayers to get the benefits they deserve and become less dependent on China.
Thank you. Assemblywoman, you have 1 minute to rebuttal should you choose.
Thank you. I'm really glad to have this moment to discuss AB 5 because here's the reality about AB 5. At the time that vote was taken on the floor of the California State Legislature, both this local chamber and as well as the California State Chamber of Commerce stood in a neutral position. And the reason for that was clear. AB 5 was a legislative response to the Dynamex Supreme Court decision in California of April of 2018. Dynamex fundamentally restructured and rewrote California labor law, leaving every local small business potentially exposed to frivolous misclassification lawsuits. So in fact, the unemployment that is occurring right now is absolutely driven by COVID. And when the unemployment insurance bill comes due, because California and other states are borrowing from the federal government, those businesses who play by the rules, who don't cheat the system, who are going to be on the hook for paying that back, not the big guys who are trying to carve out exceptions for themselves to save labor costs.
Thank you both. Question 3 goes, we start with Congressman Mike Garcia, and we have Mr. Brawley on.
Thank you again, Peter. Let's change the subject to transportation. Transportation is very important locally in Santa Cruz and the whole 25th district. How does it rank among your priorities as our next congressperson? What specific activities will you take to improve mobility, safety, and goods movement in the entire 25th district?
Great question, Hunt. And I'm on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. It's a huge honor to be on such a powerful committee. The reality is that this is a place where we can actually make a lot of good things happen. This is a committee that I'm on that actually is bipartisan. We have Americans on both sides of the aisles negotiating in good faith. Unfortunately, the bill that came forward just a few weeks ago wasn't an infrastructure bill. It was a funding source for the Green New Deal. What we need is higher capacity. We need wider freeways. We need better infrastructure. We need to invest in our freeways, especially here in California, especially in Southern California in our district. It's painful to get from the Antelope Valley down to West LA, where most of the jobs are at. It's painful to get out of Santa Clarita and Simi Valley the same way. So we have to invest in programs that will actually improve capacity, and throughput through the choke points, especially in the Newhall Pass and in the Ventura Mount Mulholland Pass as well. We've got to make sure that, frankly, we're bringing jobs into our district so that we're not having to commute outside of the district. Ideally, we live here, we work here, we take pride in our communities, the money should stay here, and we should be able to build the jobs, and that's something that Santa Clarita, as well as the partners, many of them on the phone here, have been able to do. So the focus is to bring the jobs here into the district, improve capacity. We can improve also the railways and kind of taking all of the above strategy. I want to take issue with something that the Assemblywoman mentioned earlier about AB5. As she said, the vote was initially a neutral position from several equities, the original vote. But after about a year, we all realized that AB5 was a poison pill and that it was killing jobs. AB5 is the reason why Uber and Lyft are leaving the state in the midst of the COVID environment, not only losing potentially 200,000 jobs for the gig economy and independent contractors, but really inducing a major public safety concern. You talk about transportation, not having Uber and Lyft in our local communities as a result of AB5 is going to drive DUI rates through the roof. It's going to drive teenage vehicular deaths through the roof.
Thank you, Congressman.
And we need to repeal that bill right now.
Thank you. Assemblywoman, you have 2 minutes.
Well, Lyft and Uber haven't left yet. They just don't want to play by the same rules as everybody else. I have a feeling that they're going to end up sticking around and figure out a way to play by those rules that have been established not only through AB5, but 2 subsequent court decisions. But when it comes to transportation, I really appreciate this question. This is something my state office has worked on vigorously the whole time that we've been in office. But Congressman, you know, it is a fallacy to say that any infrastructure or transportation bill at this point can be taken away from environmental concerns. Greenhouse gas emissions are now the highest point that affects them the most is our transportation system. So any vote that you're going to be called upon to take, and you did vote no, you voted against the interests of this district when you voted against that infrastructure bill, they are inextricably linked. Transportation causes greenhouse gas emission. And so the future investment that we do in transportation has to address that because the consequences of climate change are far too expensive for us to do otherwise. But here locally in the community, 514 freeway access absolutely has to be improved. We need to have a significant amount of investment to double track Metrolink in and out of the outer communities, especially out into the Antelope Valley, so that routes run more frequently and can be more dependable for our commuters who do have to travel into the Los Angeles area for work. There is much more that we can do on the ground. What the Antelope Valley has done with its public transportation and transferring over its fleet to a cleaner energy source has allowed them to significantly reduce rates, making it very affordable to everyone who wants to use that ridership. So transportation, additional smart investment and supporting infrastructure investment, which would have improved that in our communities as well as bringing new jobs, is important. And the Congressman missed the mark with that no vote.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Congressman, you have 1 minute.
Yeah, that no vote in that bill that came before us had nothing to do with the 405. I consulted with local cities and city managers and asked them if this was a good thing. They all said no. It did nothing to improve capacity and our quality of life on the freeways. Didn't touch the 5, didn't touch the 405. It was the wrong bill. It just would have raised our taxes and made our lives more painful. Uber and Lyft are leaving, and if they don't leave, it's because we vote no, or excuse me, vote yes on Prop 22, which actually will repeal the portion of AB5 that affects these private contractor jobs.
30 seconds.
Look, the environment is important, right? And I'm not saying that we don't need to do everything we can to lower emissions. I'm personally doing what I can. I drive an all-electric vehicle. I take pride in that. But we've got to make sure that we're also improving the freeways around us and actually passing meaningful infrastructure bills. And actually, these infrastructure bills, if done right, will actually improve the jobs in our area, bring a lot of work share back into our district, and see massive improvements, not only in the freeways, but the quality of life and the cash infusions that we desperately need right now.
Thank you, Congressman. Mr. Musella has question 4, and we will go ahead and begin with Assemblywoman Christy Smith.
Great, thanks, Peter. Next question. With wildfires causing substantial damage to businesses, homes, and interruptions in our local economy at increasing rates, we've seen insurance companies either completely deny or raise premiums substantially. What do you see the role of the federal government in mitigating these costs?
That's a fantastic question. And as we're beginning to see, this is one of the real-time economic consequences of our inability to aggressively deal with climate change and the fact that we have had so many dramatic fires in this district in the last several fire seasons speaks volumes to that, and the number of homeowners, in fact, who have lost the opportunity. And so we might have to think about changes to insurance pools, particularly for property and casualty insurance, to help mitigate those costs. But the best thing that we can do nationally is make sure that we have a response and financial support when these natural disasters take place, so that some of that most significant loss is mitigated and homeowners have an opportunity to tap into federally supported either low interest loan programs or other financing programs that help them to be able to rebuild. But we're going to have to mitigate the risk, and that's going to take all of us being involved with that. So it is something that I have wanted to work on, look forward to doing it at the federal level. But again, it takes acknowledging first and foremost that climate change is real, that what we are experiencing here in California, everything from sea level rise to the significant wildfires where there is devastating property damage, has a real economic impact. And we are at a huge loss if we don't begin to address the root causes as well as the possible solutions.
Thank you. Congressman Garcia, you have 2 minutes.
Yeah, the first thing we need are people to represent us and lead us in government who actually understand why these fires are happening at a higher rate than they ever have. Christy is burying her head in the sand, attributing it to climate change. The 1 degree increase in the planet's warming over the last 50 years, and I'm not going to argue the planet is warming, but that doesn't change the physics of the fire triangle. What we're experiencing here is the end result of Sacramento and frankly the federal government not investing in deforestation programs, not getting rid of the dead brush and the leaves that have been accumulating over the last 40 years. In the last 40 years, we've seen the population of Southern California double. So that human to wildlife interface has more than quadrupled in that same time frame. We have homeless living in areas that are highly flammable. We have a high amount of effectively a lot of fuel and BTUs out in our forests right now. So we need to invest in the deforestation programs, both at the federal and state level. Our district is a little bit more federal land than state, but we need both levels of government to cooperate and understand the root cause of this. We need more large aerial tankers. Right now, you're seeing Canadian super scoopers and helicopters fly overhead. I've met with several local agencies, including the C-130 unit out at Port Hueneme, just 45 miles west of Santa Clarita. They've got 2 aircraft that have about 3 times the capacity of those super scoopers, and they drop that red powder FOS check. That's how you fight fires. We need roughly 10 more of those C-130s. Those are federal assets that I'm actively pursuing to make sure they're at our disposal in California. So we've got to remove the fuel. We've got to add more firefighting assets, support our firefighters on the ground, give them all the resources, and not turn this into a political fight, not bury our heads in the sand and call it something that it's not. We need the federal government, state and local governments to cooperate, bring the right assets, bring the right head count to these fires. And frankly, we need to do more prescribed burns in the off season so that we're removing a lot of this fuel when it's most appropriate to do so.
Thank you.
By the way, that's a huge public safety issue. So when you talk about public safety in this election, that is what's making people probably the most nervous besides politicians wanting to defund police. We have to take care of this problem or people will move.
Thank you, Congressman. Assemblywoman, you have 1 minute for rebuttal.
Well, I appreciate this conversation because I'm the candidate in this race who's very proud to be supported by our local firefighters at the county level and our statewide firefighters. And the reality is this, the congressman is speaking wildly out of turn. Deforestation leads to additional climate change. And you will not find any greater climate activists right now than our state and our country's firefighters. They know that the climate change, even in an increment of 1 degree, significantly changes the run, rate, and rise of these fires and how deadly they are and how fast they move. Now, absolutely, there are other infrastructure concerns that we need to talk about, but deforestation is not one of them. Smart and environmentally sound forest management is incredibly important, and the federal government has failed to step up time and time again in California, where the majority of our forests are federal land, and I'm going to make sure that we live up to our obligation to do that.
Thank you both. Mr. Brawley has our next question. Congressman, we'll start with you, and you have 2 minutes to respond.
Thank you again, Peter. Every state has reached with various policies to combat the COVID-19 pandemic, with varying degrees of success and consequences. Do each of you believe that there should be a more coordinated federal response to COVID-19, and what should that federal response be? Thank you.
Yeah, so I do believe we can all get better. All levels of government can improve, both in the decision making throughout the process and moving forward. I think at the federal level, our responsibility is to make sure, again, to our earlier question, that we're getting the right financial resources to the small businesses, to the individual taxpayers, and to those who are frankly still suffering as a result of it. We do need a national PPE program. We need to rebuild our stock and our national reserves and our inventory for things like ventilators and other medical equipment that we need. So yes, moving forward, we need a plan. We've got to be proactive. We've got to be less dependent on China. Like I said, we've got to be able to manufacture and be able to be self-sufficient at the national level without a dependency on really China and other allies that we may have too much dependency on. The problem is right now that we've got states making decisions, and really in California and in our district, specifically in LA, we have a governor right now who is not downloading the authority to open businesses and schools up to the local levels. The local mayors should be making these decisions based on local data. Right now we have a governor who has not downloaded that decision. He's holding the authority with arbitrary and capricious reopening requirements and criteria, and he's using county level data. And in our case, LA County is bigger than some states. So we've got frustrations in Santa Clarita, Simi Valley, Antelope Valley, where we know we should be able to reopen. We know how to mitigate the risk. We have the PPE, and we want to get our kids back in school. So that's the real crux. We can't make this a political issue. We're holding people hostage right now, and unfortunately, Nancy Pelosi at the federal level is preventing a true COVID package from coming to the floor for a vote. And I absolutely support it. We're pushing hard. I actually was one of the first to sign a discharge petition that would actually allow that $138 billion that's still left in the PPP bucket to get released. It should have been released, and we have not been able to bring that to a vote.
Thank you. Assemblywoman, you have 2 minutes.
Here's what a federal response should look like. First and foremost, a president who did not hide the truth from the American public and become the greatest abject failure in protection terms in United States history. We failed to stay engaged with the global community and how they were dealing with the crisis and the pandemic, to learn from them, to look at best practices internationally that reduced the rate of infection and kept other countries, other first world countries safe, while America struggled with a 50-state solution that was directly a result of this president and his failure to lead. Now, with respect to what should happen from here forward, again, we cannot stress it enough. Nationally, there needs to be contact tracing. There needs to be a clear national directive in terms of PPE. And I do agree, one of the things that we have found is that we were far too reliant on China for some of the most critical components of PPE development and production. That is something that needs to change. America needs to set a new course on that and make sure that never again in the time of a crisis like this, that we're dependent on a global market that might let us down. But first and foremost, we have to acknowledge that scientifically based responses to public health crises by their nature should not be politicized, yet this has been politicized from the outset by an administration that did not want to acknowledge that this crisis existed because they wanted to be reelected to office, rather than putting everyday Americans and Californians and even members of our own community first. And yes, it has been a significant local challenge, especially when we see the disparity between infection rates here in a more affluent part of town versus other areas of Los Angeles County where there are such significant disparities in the provision of healthcare and healthcare services. All of those are issues that need to be addressed going forward, but we start based in science, we get this virus under control, and we move forward together as a country, and as we've done in other times of crisis.
Thank you. Congressman, you have 1 minute for a rebuttal.
Yeah, the irony of saying she doesn't want to politicize it yet, she's bringing up someone who she's not running against and isn't in this race. Look, the reality is that there's a lot of lessons learned here, and I agree. Let's use the science. Let's use science. Let's look at the data. And the simple fact is that we should be opening our businesses right now. We should be opening our schools. Our kids should physically be back in their classrooms so that the parents can go back to work, so that the small businesses can hire their employees. They can get back online, and we can reinvigorate one of the strongest economies that this world has ever seen. We will get there, guys. I agree. Let's not politicize it. Let's not point fingers. This is a virus that we can't see that's killed hundreds of thousands of Americans. We need to figure out the solutions. The solutions are coming. and we'll get the help on the streets. But you know, let's open businesses up and use the data to substantiate that reopening, especially here in the beautiful 25th district.
Thank you both. Mr. Musella has our next question, and we will start with Assemblywoman Christy Smith. You have 2 minutes.
Great, thanks again, Peter. The next question is, every 10 years, census data determines how many representatives each state gets in Congress. And we are risking losing 2 congressional seats here in California. Billions of dollars are at stake in federal funding, not only for states, but for local governments if there isn't an accurate and full count of the population. Important services such as public health, affordable housing, education, and key infrastructure depend on this funding. The census was ended early at the direction of the White House. Do you support this, and why?
I don't support the census ending early. This year of all years, when we find that our healthcare system is strained, that our school system is strained, that our public services, including public safety, are strained to meet the challenges of this moment and this crisis. Going forward, they are all going to need those additional resources. Here in California alone, we have a $54 billion budget shortfall as a result of the COVID economy. And all of those municipal level services really struggling to keep pace. And we are weeks and in some cases months out from seeing drastic cuts to those services take place. Again, another critical reason why I do earnestly hope that the congressman has another opportunity to vote on a COVID support package by the end of this year, and that he will support it, even if he doesn't entirely agree with 100% of it, which has been his reason for voting no on the prior packages where an agreement has been reached. But you know, the fact of the matter is that we are in challenging times. And this is about coming together. This is about acknowledging that this crisis is met more with science and more with a dedicated application of good public policy than anything else. But that depends on resources, and the census is part of what drives those resources. It's incredibly important. We were proud from my office to continue to push to ensure that as many people as we could district-wide participated. We do lead the edge a little bit as compared with other portions of Los Angeles County, but more time, I think, is warranted. This determines the fate of this region and the country for 10 more years. And so it was short-sighted to
30 seconds. Congressman, you have 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. So first of all, as far as the COVID bill package that Assemblywoman Smith mentioned, I hope it's before the end of this week. And absolutely, I'm willing to negotiate. The current package at 1.5 trillion is not what I wanted, but I would vote for it in a heartbeat. What's been presented to us so far have not been in the interest of the country and for COVID. As far as the census, I'm absolutely supportive of continuing the census when it's safe to do so. And I think there's some considerations with COVID that we need to look at. But we're losing 2 seats at the federal level and in the House of Representatives because people are leaving California. It's got nothing to do with anything around the census. The census has been objective, and the reality is that people are leaving California. And John, I'll ask you why, but I know we don't have time, but you know why. It's because of AB 5. It's because of increasing taxes. It's hard enough to live in California with all the bureaucracy and regulations that we have. It's hard for businesses to operate. It's hard to build a home when you have all of the red tape needed to just build a foundation costs 200 grand before you even get started. That's why housing is unaffordable. On top of that, you've got politicians passing AB 5 and then not repealing them. And Christy Smith has been at the center of that argument. She's passed about $3 billion in additional taxes. She talks about having a tax plan. Well, guess what? A tax plan doesn't mean increasing your taxes right now. It means decreasing your taxes, incentivizing businesses, and bringing people back to California. I get a text message every morning from families, local constituents and friends who are saying they're leaving, they're going to Texas, they're going to Tennessee, Idaho, and Arizona because because of their tax plans. So you know, Sacramento and the politicians, and frankly, Christy Smith, is the reason why people are leaving California. And that is the reason we will lose 2 seats in the House of Representatives. And I just hope we don't lose the people who are actually pro-business and for lower taxes on the taxpayers.
Thank you, Congressman. Assemblywoman, you have 1 minute for a rebuttal.
Thank you. Well, I'm a little perplexed by the congressman's response there, because I don't know how we can be at once safe enough to reopen business, but not safe enough to keep going with the census. So that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But beyond that, let's talk about, you brought up the Mco tax, Congressman, and that wasn't an increase of $3 billion. That was an extension of an assessment that's paid by health maintenance organizations in the state of California that allows us to keep our healthcare economy going here. It allows us to access $1 billion in federal resources to keep the doors of our hospitals and community clinics open. Exactly the kind of investment that is at risk with an incomplete census count. Everybody who pays taxes in California matters, but that return on investment should mean something. And that means when there's an opportunity to do something like support that MCO assessment, which had bipartisan support to support our state's healthcare system, you bet I'm going to do it.
Thank you both. So I have the next two questions for you, and we'll first start with Congressman.
Do I get a rebuttal on that one, or no? I'm sorry, that was the last. Okay.
Yeah, that was the rebuttal on that one.
Thank you. Sorry.
No worries. I have the next two questions. Congressman, we'll start with you. You have 2 minutes. How do you balance the loyalty to your district and local businesses versus loyalty to your party in DC?
I have no loyalties to my party. I'm loyal to this country. I always have been. You all know my history. I was a naval aviator and a frontline warfighter in support of this Constitution and our nation's security. Christy Smith mocked it, and she did. She apologized for it publicly. I'm an executive, I'm a small business owner, and I'm a Californian. At my core, I'm a patriot. Now I'm a citizen legislator, and I just want to see our nation be as good as it is. So I don't have loyalties to my party. I don't have loyalties to any individuals. My loyalties lie with the country, the Constitution, and the 25th Congressional District. And you guys know I ran because I didn't feel like we were being represented by someone who was qualified and represented our values, and that was my predecessor who resigned back in November. So I'm in this for the interest of the nation. I'm in this for the interest of the district. This is a tremendous sacrifice. I gain nothing in doing this besides the honor and the noble mission of making sure that I have a continuation of service to this beautiful country. And like I said, I don't want my country to turn into what California has become. We live in a beautiful state. The geography, the weather, the people are fantastic. We have the 5th largest GDP in the world, yet we're insolvent. And it's because of the tax policies of people like Christy Smith. It's because of our debt. They continue to raise our taxes. And by the way, I'll make public every tax vote that Christy Smith has had in the last 20 months. I'll make public every vote that she's had on AB5 and the rationale behind it. It was a head nod to the unions and it was a tax grab. And that's the reality of it, guys. That's just plain speak.
30 seconds.
But let's face it, we deserve better in California. While they've been dialing up our taxes, they say they're building a rainy day fund. Then the rainy day comes in the form of COVID in this case, and we're completely bankrupt and we're insolvent. And now Christy Smith is coming to the federal government hat in hand, asking for help when her own governor is not doing what's necessary. Her own governor is putting COVID-infected senior citizens back into nursing homes, which, by the way, we are looking at. We're gonna chase these governors who made these bad decisions and killed our elderly during the COVID crisis. So that's where my loyalties. My loyalties lie with the country, the Constitution, this district, of all things public safety.
Perfect. Thank you. Assemblywoman, you have 2 minutes.
All right, well, to unpack it, first and foremost, California has a balanced budget requirement. We balance our budget every year. The state's robust rainy day fund is going to allow us to get through year 1 that we're in right now of this COVID crisis, as well as years 2 and 3. That's how the rainy day fund was structured to work, that in a time of economic downturn, we use those savings to mitigate this significant fallout that would happen if we had to implement drastic cuts all at once in one budget year. That's why it's spread out over 3 years, Congressman, and that's called good public policy. And with respect to the question, I've proven time and again that I'm not loyal to my party. I'm loyal to the interests of this district, as evidenced by the fact that many of you have come to me over these last 2 years with significant concerns. We've had meaningful conversations, and everybody gets a seat at the table. But one of the votes this year that my opponent has given me so much grief over and completely misrepresented the truth on is that I lost a committee chair, not because I wasn't having hearings, but because I stood up to my party and I took a pro-business vote. There was a budget trailer bill that would have limited net operating loss and restructured fundamental tax credit programs that are essential to businesses in this district and across the state. And I stood up and I said no. And the consequence of that was that I lost a leadership position. I would do that again, given the right conditions. What matters most is effective public policy, not voting with your party time and again, and also not being beholden to public and corporate interests. So I'm happy to say that I'm the one person in this race who is not taking lobbyist money. I'm not taking big corporate money in this federal race. And that's going to continue to be the case for as long as I serve in Washington, D.C. Community first, country first, party last.
Thank you. Congressman, you have 1 minute for a rebuttal.
Yeah, what you just heard was a politician lie to you. You don't get fired from a committee because you vote against party lines. As much as we're dysfunctional on certain parts of the aisle here, they don't fire you when you vote against party lines. That's absurd. You're not doing your constituents or your district in any good or in their best interest when you're removed from your committees due to a lack of performance. Christy Smith was in charge of the Emergency Management Committee, and in the wake of COVID, didn't hold a single hearing. She was the chairwoman of that committee and did nothing while she was in that position. She was removed from that, and I think a couple other committees, if I'm not mistaken. We talk about a balanced budget. Balanced budgets are a good thing, and I agree. We need to get rid of our nation's debt and our deficit. As a businessman, I know how to do that, and we absolutely need to pass a balanced budget amendment at the national level. Our nation's debt is probably the biggest threat to our nation's security right now. We've got to address that. California claims to have done that, but when you actually look at their numbers in their books, we are insolvent. We have so many obligations and unfunded requirements out there.
Thank you, Congressman.
We are completely insolvent right now, and it's a lack of leadership that people understand.
Peter, if I may, the congressman leaned in with a personal attack, and I'd like very much the opportunity to respond there, please.
Sure.
What was the personal attack first? Can we identify that?
Congressman, I lost my committee position because of a vote I took. The reason that we were not holding hearings was because in California State Capitol, we were being COVID compliant. Policy committees were given priority over informational committees, which mine was. It also makes absolutely zero leadership sense to pull emergency officials off the front lines of a crisis, to have them come and testify in a committee when the state needs them on the front lines doing their job. Your entire campaign has been about diminishing my work, about radically not telling the truth.
Assemblywoman.
So as required, show some respect in this forum and in this setting, and at least endeavor to be truthful.
Sorry, I will have to cut you off. I apologize, but I will have to just cut you off on that. We're going to go ahead and move on to our final question. Just like the last question, this is another one that's come from one of our viewers, and we will start with you, Assemblywoman. You'll have 2 minutes. Do you believe the federal government has a role in protecting workers from discrimination in the workplace?
Absolutely, and I so appreciate this question. Look, the very meaningful gains that have come over decades, whether it's based on women's pay equity, on equity for racial minorities in the workplace, and most recently, the significant gains for the LGBTQ+ community, those are protections that are essential and fundamental. And the federal government does have a role to play as the arbiters of our system of commerce in this country. Now, a person's personal set of beliefs, separate and apart from that, are their own, and that's a place where the federal government should not go. But when it comes to our system of commerce, in the workplace, in our marketplaces, there is a decided role for the federal government to play to ensure that there is equity and fairness and a lack of discrimination.
Thank you. Congressman, you have 2 minutes.
Yeah, great question. First, let me address the statement that was made earlier. I wasn't disrespecting you, Assemblywoman. I meant no disrespect. I was actually trying to show respect to your party, who I don't believe, as much as I disagree with the Democrat Party right now, I don't think they are shallow enough to fire their leaders because they decided to vote outside the party line. So maybe I was giving your party too much credit. The fact is that the federal government absolutely does need to protect employees. We need a level playing field. We need to make right some of the wrongs that have been had over the last 244 years in our nation. And this is where my experiences in the business world, I've not only led a small business as a single proprietor LLC, but I've also been a leader in a large corporation where you do need to make sure that you're hiring diverse and inclusive staff. And it's more than that. It's not just making sure it's a level playing field. In my case, I had a very strong reputation for making sure that I was advocating for women, advocating for people of color, the LGBTQ community, making sure that we were not just giving people a fair chance, but we were actually hiring, promoting, and advocating for them throughout the cycle. And that's how you make change. When you look at my staffs, both in the civilian world as a business leader, but now also in my official capacity in Congress, as well as on the campaign, you see that, a tremendously diverse staff. I don't play identity politics. People are there because they're qualified and they're the best at
30
it.
seconds.
And I'll never advertise this outside of a question like this, but my chief of staff is an African American. Most of my staff on both the political and the official side are women. We have LGBTQ members on both sides of the staff. They're there because they're the most qualified. They deserve to be there. And I've advocated to make sure that we're getting the right people. And really, it's the diversity of thought that's benefiting that. We all have different colors, different beliefs, different religions, but it's our backgrounds and our ideologies that allows us to think outside the box and actually be very tolerant and over a wide spectrum of ideologies that you don't normally see in some communities.
Thank you, Congressman.
I'm very proud of that.
1 minute for a rebuttal.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And I think the difference in our positions, and I appreciate the Congressman and his nod to diversity in hiring and training practices, and even on his own team. And my team reflects that beautiful diversity as well. But given the national overtones and undertones when it comes to racial and social equity and justice right now, there's a significant difference between tolerance and embrace. And it's one thing to say that you tolerate a system and you participate in it, but it's another thing to embrace that diversity and work day in, day out, every day to make sure that everybody who's a part of that system feels welcome and equal. So I think those are where we're going to leave it.
Well said.
Perfect. Well, I'd like to thank each of you for answering our questions and being here. I'd like to thank Mr. Brawley and Mr. Musella for their participation as well. We are going to now move into closing remarks at this time. As a reminder, you will each have 3 minutes and remarks will be in reverse order from our opening statements. So Assemblywoman Smith, we will go ahead and begin with you, and your time will start once you begin speaking.
Thank you. Again, thank you, Congressman Garcia, for showing up today for this. I think ends up being our only forum available to the public. I thank the Chamber for hosting. It has been an honor and a privilege to serve this community for 11 years as an elected representative, 9 years on the school board, work that I valued so tremendously and learned so much from, because really at the local level is where the dollar hits the road and where you learn that all of the decisions that are made at the state level and the federal level really have the most significant impact right there in your local community. At the state level, I've been very proud of the work that we've done in very challenging times. California has been one of the leaders in the country in meeting the demand of this moment of the COVID crisis. We are not certainly out of the woods yet and not without significant challenges to this economy. But that's why I've been proud to be part of the leadership team that has invested in making significant changes that we have, including being the co-author of the 2 bills that rectify the further challenges presented by AB 5 and making sure that we're eliminating any additional barriers as we go forward as a result of AB 5. Making sure that I co-authored a startup business tax credit, that I have worked hand in hand with this community, with this chamber, as we have connected people to the resources that they need to be made whole as best we can in this moment and to feel prepared to go forward and to continue to come out of this crisis together. I've been proud that during my service, I have brought back millions of dollars of investment to this community, $700,000 for the See Me Free Health Clinic, $450,000 for the Santa Clarita Senior Center, over $1 million of investment in vocational training programs at College of the Canyons. I am a public policy advocate first and foremost. I understand how to get the work done in a bipartisan way, putting the community first. That is work that I look forward to continue to do on behalf of this community with always an open door policy, a listening ear, and a willingness to move all of us forward to see better days that we can all be proud of. So I thank the Chamber so much again for inviting us both. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Congressman, you have 3 minutes.
Yeah, great. And thank you all again for joining us in the Chamber for hosting this. Again, I'm honored to have the support of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Like I said, this is one of my most proud endorsements, and it's because of my realization and my frankly advocacy of small businesses, not only in our district but throughout the country. That is the key to getting the economy back online. I want to thank Assemblywoman Smith for being here. I take pride in a campaign that has not been about personal attacks. I'll make public anything that we do attack the Assemblywoman on. We have all those sources. It's about her official voting record. It's about her really going after small businesses and killing our California economy. For me, this isn't about being a Republican or a Democrat. This isn't a political race for me. This This is about right versus wrong. This is about growth versus squandering our precious taxpayer dollars. For me, it's about being a political outsider, someone who is running in the interest of our nation and in our district, coming out of the private sector, coming out of the military and a duty towards our country versus a lifelong bureaucrat. It's about wanting to run and wanting to represent this beautiful district, not being tapped on the shoulder and being asked to in the wake of someone's resignation. It's about supporting lower taxes and not increasing taxes. It's about being pro-business growth and not passing bills like AB5, which are actually killing us and making people want to leave California. Really, it's about public safety. And when you look at everything that's going around, whether it's defunding the police, these fires that we're experiencing right now, bills like Prop 47 and 57 are allowing felonies to be charged as misdemeanors. These are all ills of California that we can't afford to experience at the national level. And so for me, this is really about public safety more than anything. And Christy Smith has supported defunding the police while I've been giving 10% of my salary on a monthly basis to local sheriff foundations. You're shaking your head, but we'll make public the sources where you actually did support defunding the police, Christy. This is about showing up and representing your district. I've made 100% of my votes in person. Congress was allowed to vote by proxy in the midst of the COVID environment, and most representatives from California took advantage of that. They didn't show up. They weren't in DC. If this is a war on COVID, then members of Congress are on the front line, and we need to be passing legislation to help the taxpayers and small businesses. I was there in person. We need to be there more, and we need to be passing bills. Christy Smith, in the same time frame of last year, from May to September, when I was in office in these months this year, missed 9 out of 40 votes.
30 seconds.
She didn't show up for the latest repeal vote on AB5. She didn't show up on the latest vote that was meant to make sure that a 24-year-old couldn't have sex with a 14-year-old. It's called the pedophile bill. I think it's SB 145. She didn't show up to vote. So this is about public safety. This is about saving California. We have one job. We have 2 applicants. And to me, you can drive a truck through the differences between Assemblywoman Smith and I. It's been an honor to serve. We've done great work for this district, and I look forward to another tremendous 2 years, and hopefully as long as the constituents will allow me to serve. Thank you guys again.
Perfect. So on behalf of the SCV Chamber, thank you both for being here with us today, and I'd like to thank all those who attended. As a reminder, the Chamber has provided information in regard to the November election, so please check out our Election Watch 2020 page under our Advocacy tab. You can find out on where you can drop your ballot off, track your ballot, and how to vote safely in person. So we thank you all for joining. Thank you both Congressmen, Assemblywomen for being here, and we hope you all enjoy the rest of your day. Stay safe.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you.